All right. Next presentation is from Gayle Sloane, CEO of the Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association Australia. This presentation is titled Waste Export Ban and Government Waste Policy Impact on Industry. Now, Gayle is an arts and law graduate from the University of Adelaide and spent many years working for the New South Wales Attorney General's Department before moving into the Attorney General's Ministerial Office in 1998 and then the New South Wales Police Minister's Office in 2000. Following this time in state government, Gayle worked as a director in several New South Wales councils, primarily looking after service delivery and assets. She developed and delivered a number of waste management contracts on behalf of councils, as well as managing environmental and regulatory departments, including rangers and compliance officers. After 3 years of staying at home, raising a family, Gayle returned to work in 2012 at Visey. In November 2016, she joined WMRR as the Chief Executive Officer. So can I please get you to put your hands together and welcome Gayle for the next presentation.
All that does is make me feel old when you say that 1998 I did something. So thank you for having me. I am the CEO of the Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association. Rick might have dropped me off, but I'm not going anywhere. We are the national peak body for the waste and resource recovery industry. We have over 2,000 members nationally for 500 companies. And can I just tell you, I hate the word waste. So I am going to agree with Rick. We need to think differently. So my remit today is to talk to you about export bans and a bit of the around the grounds. I'll try not to annoy too many people, but anyone who knows me knows that's probably quite hard for me to do. Just want to start, and because I did this presentation myself, oops, it might be really bad because I'm not very good at PowerPoint. I am very limited. National context, yes, we are all very, very differently, right? But this is all about material management, not waste management. We need to actually change this conversation to the start of the chain. And the last time I checked, you've got the same national companies working in Darwin. And I don't mean the waste industry, I mean the generators and producers who are bringing in material. So I don't think you're that different. And I was on that stakeholder group that looked at the 80 action plan items. And whilst I don't like very many of them, it's a bloody good start. And for once, we've actually got a common vision and a common direction. But I'm not going to cover all that Rick did, but I'm just going to give you a bit of context as I go. We generate 74 million tonnes of material that is waste normally in Australia. What scares me most of all, though, is if you look at the column on the right, it's about 1/10 of the total waste that's generated in Australia when you bring in agriculture and mining. That's really scary for me. It's really scary for me that we actually dispose, chuck out, and do not put value on that material, right? So this is valuable natural resources. We opened with Welcome to Country that talked about extreme weather events. 70% of carbon emissions comes from material management. If we don't not start thinking about how we manage that material, we are not going to address these climate change challenges. And I know it's really weird for someone in this industry to sound like a greenie, and I'm so not a greenie, ask the boomerang, but I think there's a clear correlation between it and we need to start having those conversations. I know NT per capita does not generate anywhere near as much, maybe because we don't actually have the systems in place to capture that data, but it's still waste being generated. In Australia, it's an awful thing that we are the second highest generators of waste globally. That is not a record that I'm proud of. Just a little bit of a touch on the fact that, you know, recycling and recovery rates have basically stagnated across the country. What we've been doing, no different, like whilst I'm not going to point out that it's only 23% in Northern Territory, which is a great opportunity, nearly everyone has stagnated. So the conversation about how we do things differently going forward is a really important one. You know, the policies that we have are not working for our nation generally, which, you know, is sad really, because what we're talking about here, and I haven't heard the word this morning, is jobs, like jobs and environment as well. And we're missing out on the opportunity to create jobs because we're not thinking differently, but we're starting to. Rick is absolutely right. I probably go to 2018. I feel like China, suddenly we came out of the dark. You know, we had trashed, if you saw that on Four Corners. You know, if you believe it still reinforced the concept, they're all dodgy bastards in this industry. We are not, right? We're all trying to do and solve society's problems, but we were in the dark and no one thought about what we did. And yes, we exported. We had to export because there is not, we work in a global environment. We import products. We actually have China who've got lower energy costs, lower staff costs, we were working in that global environment for them to turn our products back into materials to go back out there. We do not value onshore manufacturing. We do not value recycling in Australia. So of course we were working in a global environment. We were not doing anything wrong. And despite Scott Morrison sitting on Channel 7 one morning saying we were lying, we were not lying. We were doing our best to continue to actually turn those products and those resources into valuable materials and put them back on the shelf. But it is not our responsibility alone to do that. And that's why I guess I feel really angry and proud of what we do, and I want to do more of it, right? Sankey diagram, if you're seeing these, so all my data today will come from the National Waste Data Report. I'm a data nerd. If you're bored, you can read it. So this is when the Sankey report, which is the diagram on the right, started to go into the National Waste Report, so you could see where the material is going. Top right, there's not a huge amount that was going offshore, 5 million of our 74 million tonnes. The vast majority of it was metals, okay? But, we were lying, allegedly. Bin ferries never actually came. We were always working really hard to deal with that yellow bin. Anyway, but we had to start dealing with it. Rick's touched on China's national sword. Why did they do it? Well, they're really lucky in some ways. They're a dictatorship. They wanted to reduce their carbon emissions by 50%. They wanted to create an internal circular economy, and they wanted to stop the dumping on them. All good ambitions, really, and they could get away with it. It's not so easy in Australia to bring everyone together to achieve those outcomes. Rick touched on the National Waste Policy and the 7 targets. I got to say to you, the waste industry is not going to drive a circular economy, people, right? We actually need that supply. We have to stop that thinking, right? We also have to stop pretending that we can keep solving everyone's problems in a linear way, that you can just keep bringing stuff to market designed poorly and we'll keep turning it into something else. Yes, we have to walk and chew gum. We actually need to take that concrete and crush it and put it into road base until we design it properly for reuse. But we are not going to drive that change, right? But we've got to be at that table driving the change. It was awesome in 2018 and 19 to have Ministers of Environment meeting where waste dominated the agenda. First time in living memory we're on the agenda. You cannot live in this society without understanding how you manage material to minimise environmental human harm. But also we cannot do that without creating jobs. So where is the emphasis on reusing that material? So we got the 7 objectives, which was great. Between 2018 and 2019, we saw all the stuff about, dumping offshore. Arguably, those bales were being sold into facilities, right? Arguably, they were being sorted in not the best way, but we weren't dumping. No one put stuff on a ship at a serious cost for it to be dumped in rivers in Asia, right? But unfortunately, the images weren't great. And unfortunately, we had no homes for them here. So we ended up with the COAG decision in 2018. God, COVID just took a year out, didn't it? My clothes don't fit, my memory's gone. Anyway, and we end up with this ban on the materials that were, I guess, the most visual ones. So plastics, glass was an odd one that got brought in at the last minute. At that stage, we're only exporting 18,000 tonnes nationally because glass is heavy, it's hard to get out, yeah. Paper, there was quite a lot. There was about 600,000 tonnes at the time of China that was going offshore, and tyres. We kind of slipped in tyres because we were a bit worried about the images that would come out if the tyres and the pyrolysis in India got out. We don't want to be seen to be doing that stuff overseas. So we end up with an export ban that started as of 1 January this year. As an industry, we agree we need to short our shit out onshore, right? But it's really hard to do that if you don't have the infrastructure or the market demand to buy that back, right? There's only so much we can stockpile and move through the chain of remanufacturing if no one's buying it back. And there's no obligation in Australia as yet. The one thing that makes me really sad about this, point 4. Originally, when it went 2018 to MEM, it actually had a target of increasing the amount of government recycled content procured. It was 10%. By the time it went back in 2019, it was significantly increased. How the fuck do you, how do you measure that? Right. Oh, what's the starting point? But we'll increase it. And I just think if I'm a government minister, my job is to do, not encourage, How easy is it to encourage? We've got to do stuff. So we still have no real requirement to procure recycled content, which makes it really hard for us to pull through the supply chain, right? Irrespective, we're moving on. Just check my time. Sorry. Oh, I'm okay. So we have the export ban. We also got the waste and resource, waste Recycling and Waste Reduction Act last year, which sets up the framework to actually put the bans in place. But it also brought the product stewardship legislation, which is a federal act, not used very often. Pete will get to that, and I'll be really calm, Pete, because you're here. No, I won't. Which actually looked at national frameworks for product stewardship. It brought it in to the same act. Didn't really strengthen it, quite disappointingly. No mandated schemes as yet in Australia. We came within one vote, yes, in the upper house of trying to get packaging within that scheme. But anyway, I haven't given up yet. But we actually had a lot of attention. Like, when was the last time, if ever, we actually had a waste and resource recovery bill in federal parliament? Like, sit up, take note. We are on the agenda, people. We have a great opportunity. Yes, we need to think differently and move forward. We also got funding from the federal government. Like, there is so much cash out there, people, it's frightening. The biggest fear I've got is that we spend it wrong and we get told you've had your time. So we have to think really carefully about how we spend what we're doing as an industry and as a society, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, I believe, to set up the vision and the community that we want, which includes lots of jobs in Australia. So we got 600 million, I say like that because it was 190 million from the feds, and then you're going to see there's all this interesting accounting to pretend that it's leveraging others. Most is a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split, but we got money to start prioritising remanufacturing facilities in tyres, glass, paper and plastic, This is to date what I think has happened with that money. It's a little bit challenging to get real clarity on exactly where it is. Bear in mind that the ban started 1 January for glass, and glass is quite an easy thing to ban because glass is glass is glass is glass, and there was only 18,000 tonnes of it going offshore, right? So it took quite a while to get those glass rules out. However, most jurisdictions didn't get the funding out. We're still waiting on Queensland, and I'm not really sure what's happened in NT. But from memory, there was only about 5,000 tonnes stated as going off as impacted offshore. But, arguably, if we captured more of it, there'd be more opportunity for it to go somewhere. So around the nations, we've got very different approaches to how that's been funded. We talk about the uniqueness of NT. It is unique. Every state's unique. You're not going to do FOGO in Tasmania the same way you're going to do it in Darwin or Cairns, right? And we recognise that with how we deal with our industry. I'm hoping Clinton's going to talk about the tyre cycle stuff that's being done in remote regional WA. That's been funded under this. This is working with Aboriginal Lands Councils. We have unique bespoke solutions being funded throughout Australia through this, because we do not, despite what was said earlier, Rick, we don't take big city thinking when we take it to FNQ or anywhere else. We fund bespoke solutions, but if there's no money, we can't do much. So we finally got some money in the system that enables us to do stuff, right? So SA and did a great announcement a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, 111 million of genuinely new infrastructure being rolled out throughout Adelaide, leveraging the RMF funds and others. So work in regional areas, new paper sorting facilities, tyre cycle got a couple of things from memory, new glass facilities, 8.88 million into RPA, which does plastics, not non-food grade plastics. So lots of terrific investment going in. As we all know, though, we're a bit of a NIMBY industry, so it's not so easy, particularly if you're in a green space, to necessarily build, but a lot of these are enhancements or add-ons to existing facilities, so hopefully the planning processes won't take too long, but it is quite challenging, as we know, to get these things approved. We've also got, we're so flush with cash, it's quite scary. So besides the 600 million that's being pushed out the RMF, you may or may not be aware the Modern Manufacturing Fund is also out and available to our industry. We're one of 6 priorities that came out from the Morrison government post-COVID for funding for clean energy and recycling initiatives. Recycling clean energy kind of work, but anyway, we'll take it. So that round 2 is open for that as well. So there's billions available for that one as well. So people want to invest because, let's go back to it. Recycling, resource recovery helps address also carbon emissions, right? And we talk, I'm sure Pete's is going to talk as well, if they're talking about, FOGO and soils. We've never been at a time our soils have been more depleted than we are at present in the world. So we need to do things, circular work around these sort of issues to start addressing environment, climate change, health. So export ban process. Now, this is a nightmare. So glass is easy, right? 18,000 tons going off. Not many people exporting, probably just a couple of, we had Polytrade out of Victoria that was taking some to Malaysia. And we had some of the CDS schemes who found that if they cleaned up the glass, because I don't know if you know, 1.2 million tons of glass going into packaging in Australia. We're currently at a demand for food grade of 400,000. Visy's saying they're going to take it to 700,000. That still leaves a 500,000 shortfall, right? There's only so many roads we can build. Arguably can go in, but I'm not sure where your standard's at, but every jurisdiction is at a different place about how much glass can go in road base. And generally it's about 5% in the substratum. That's not a huge amount, right? So we're constantly looking again in that linear thinking of solving other people's problems, right? Anyway, so not much glass going off. Now, plastics, however, now there's a nightmare. All right, so plastics, as you know, at least 7 categories we tend to think: C&I, C&D, MSW. We have so much stuff that is mixed polymer that should not be on the shelf. Pete, I'll be kind. And the ban essentially said there was a lot of confusion. You can't send mixed bales off. So people knew they had to source separate materials into HDP, PET, polyprop, et cetera. We don't have facilities that are geared for that, and there is no market for who's going to source separate extended polystyrene or PVC materials. It's just not going to happen, right? So it's kind of making it very challenging. What we hadn't realised with the ban, whilst it was focusing probably just on the original thought was to deal with the plastics that was being discarded overseas, it's actually the way it's drafted gone in way further. So potentially e-waste plastic is impacted on it. Yesterday I got a call saying the bulk of bags plastic is captured in it as well. So a lot of interpretation issue, not real clear around the rules, and the permutations are mad. What we hadn't realised was it was generally traders who were taking this material offshore. So for them to get approval through the portal, so the portal came out and was released to us only about 3 weeks ago. You have to demonstrate you're a fit and proper person, as well as get a declaration that you can export. You can't do them separately. Traders have to put all their permutations in. The CDS scheme, WA and Queensland are quite caught up in that. I don't believe much of your product goes offshore, so it's not an issue for you guys, but then they need a declaration that all the collection points are doing certain sorting materials, and it's just a nightmare. So yesterday, as of 17th of June, I don't think anyone's managed to lodge a claim, lodge a request for a license, which means we're 2 weeks out from the start of the ban, which means that no one's actually, very few people are buying any product that's gone out to tender recently because they can't be guaranteed that they're going to get a license. So we're potentially going to see quite a bit of stockpiling. Oops, who knew? So anyway, we're still sort of ringing around and trying to work out how we try and solve that one. So that one is a challenge, but a great opportunity, right? So we're going to see a lot of HDP and PET, so milk bottles, water bottles, hopefully polypro, yogurt cartons, yogurt containers that will end up being circulated in Australia and reused and recycled, but will take some time. But there's definitely going to be a bit of disruption in the meantime. The other thing I guess I'll just touch on, I'm just checking my time. Oh, I stopped my clock. Oops. Hello, okay, thanks, Rick. So back to around the grounds, around the states. I'm a fan of levies and I'm happy to have a fight with anyone, because what it actually says is there's a price on material, right? And unless we put money back into this system, so it's just another polluter pays leverage, it says it's something of value, unless we put money back into the system, we're not going to achieve anything. And it's not a one size fits all. I've heard all the arguments about why we couldn't have a levy in Queensland, but we got it. Because we should get it, because we should be putting a price on those materials that come into circulation, and we shouldn't be allowing generators to externalise those costs onto councils going forward, right? And it doesn't mean the levy would apply all places equally. We heard we couldn't have it in Tasmania either, but we're getting it, and it's starting at a low rate, but it makes people think, because whilst there's no cost on it or charge on it, people will just continue to discard it. But there's other policies that have to go with that, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But it's a polluter pays principle, because we have to stop solving everyone else's problem. I'm just keep walking around going, while we continue to pretend it's easy, they're going to go, yeah, have it. But it's not easy, right? So we need to actually force people to think and design differently and take responsibility. That's what CDS did. CDS said there's a cost and there's a charge for managing this material, and it's also a value. So we have to move away from cost conversations to value creation conversations. So nearly every other jurisdiction is starting to do that. And look, I won't have all of this because I actually got quite excited when I did this, which, you know, I'm a nerd, because I kind of like, I'm running out of space. And when I first started doing this, when I started this job in 2017, 18, it was basically empty, right? And now I'm like, fuck, I got that, I got this, what else have I missed? So we actually, for the first time, have almost a common vision and framework, almost. You know, we're still not clear what society we're trying to create. Is it one that values material and reduces carbon emissions? Quite difficult when you've got a federal government who can't use the word carbon. But, you know, we're starting to think about it. We need to think about these things. We've got money, we've got a vision. We talk about going circular. I'm going to add a little bit, and I'm happy to share my prezo as long as you don't quote me, just in case I got things wrong. But, you know, we're actually starting to see a place where we've got money in our system and we're starting to move back through the supply chain and saying, generator, you are responsible for what you bring to market. Solar panels. South Australia did a massive tender about 3 years ago that said, if you're providing the solar panels, you've got to give an end of life solution to those solar panels, right? We need to think differently about how we do things. We can't keep disposing. We talked about welcome to country and how we manage country. We can't keep assuming that someone else will deal with it, right? There is only one land. There's only one environment. We have to think differently. So we go around the grounds. Look, I agree with Rick. It drives me insane that we focus on straws and low-hanging items. But, you know, that gets the public's imagination. That gets the kids' imagination. That says we're going to go away from single use to reuse or avoidance. How else do we have hierarchy conversations, which is common parlance with us, but out in the community, they don't think about it. Plastic bags drive me insane. Coffee cups, there's like billions of them, but they don't even make something like 50,000 tons in our 74 million. But at least we're having a conversation about avoidance and reuse and design. We weren't having those conversations 3 years ago, guys. So we have to jump on it and expand it. So we've got some common national priorities. You know, everyone's ticking off now on single-use plastics and problematic materials. Again, a great conversation to be had that we've got to jump on. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, 2015. More plastics in the ocean than fish by 2050. Kids resonate with that. It's the only way we got Scott Morrison's head around this is when his daughter, wasn't Jenny that time, but when his daughter said, we don't like this, Dad, we need to make a change, right? So we need to harness these conversations and think about, you know, whilst it's nice to get a gate fee at a landfill, we need to change the design so we get the right material and we create 3 times as many jobs. We need to keep having these conversations and harness the energy behind it. Lots of money out there. You guys have got a great CDS scheme. I think there's a lot more that can be done, but I can argue with you all later. I understand the strategy is coming. New South Wales only just gave us a strategy last week, and that game of mine is bigger is going on because, you know, they've got 356 million in there, as well as Victoria's only got 300 million. Anyway, we've got money coming. We've got national priorities now, though. We've got things like FOGO, right? And we'll talk about that later, I guess. Food and garden organics. Why are we doing that? Because we actually need to divert from landfill and we need to reduce carbon emissions, right? Is it going to be easy? No, it's not, because we need to make sure the product that we're putting back and applying to land is safe to do so. Is it always going to be safe when you can keep putting compostable packaging that's not certified in the bin? No, it's not, right? So we have to work out how we set up these regulatory frameworks and the education before we roll these things out. But these are reasons to do, not reasons to not do. Right? All I ever hear is reasons why we can't. Oh God, I'm all about just doing it. Let's get on with it. So it's a bit of a summary of what's happening around the states. Just 2 secs on circular economy. I just laid that. You guys all know that. I hate the word waste management. Can we call it material management hierarchy? It is such a different thing. I almost weed myself on Sunday, not just because New South Wales put out its strategy after years, but it's called sustainable materials strategy, because that's what it's about, right? Well, we continue to say to producers, just do what you like and we'll take responsibility, because last I checked, Woolies, Coles and everyone else is here and we'll just solve it. It ain't going to change. But while we move it up the supply chain and go, where is that going to go? You know, there is a requirement under ACCC for green claims that not only are you able to demonstrate something's recyclable, but where is it recyclable? We've got to have more of those conversations about where is that material going to get back in the stream? How are we going to fix this, people? You know, linear. My problem with things like microfactories and stuff is, again, we're solving everyone else's problem. Keep making it, because we'll just turn it into a fucking tile or a brick, yeah? It's great, hey? How do we reuse that? That doesn't make sense. So as a waste industry, we are not, this is a bit the current model, it's closed loop, right? So linear closed loop, a bit half and half. We take it around the supply chain, we solve it. Hopefully we turn it more into a workable product. And that is awesome and admirable. And that's what we do because we're all passionate about what we do. We try and solve, all right? But that is not circular economy. This is circular economy, where we design out waste and pollution. We design at first instance for reuse, repair, refurbishment. Things go around the cycle many, many times and doesn't come to us until end of life. There'll always be room for landfill. There'll always be room for energy because it's better to energy recover than put it into landfill and create leachate, albeit in well-managed, well-lined facilities. You know, landfill is always going to have a role because what the heck do we do with PFAS while we still allow it to go on our shelves in our food and our kids' clothing? Right. So, but we have to design differently. We have to move further up the supply chain and have the conversation around, if you're going to bring that shit to market, you've got to look after it. We've got to stop solving people's problems. So the other great thing that came out of New South Wales last week was they're actually going to put a design framework in with sustainability guidelines around what can be designed and how it comes to market. We need to have more of those conversations. You know, only this much can go in the yellow bin and we're really clear of it. But if you want to bring coffee pods and everything else to market, you've got to set up a system for it, right? We've got to stop solving other people's problems because only then we'll get change. And we've got to put a price on it because nothing drives change more than a cost, yeah? But if we let them continue to be in a negative externality that we deal with, it's not going to change. And we're not going to create those jobs. Circular economy, how are we going to get there? We're not going to get it by the tail wagging the dog, right? I love that expression. We're not going to continue to say, we'll turn your coffee cup into a tile. We're going to actually have to start talking about extended producer responsibility. Almost weed myself again yesterday, I'm getting old. Ellen MacArthur Foundation came out, and one of my things I love, saying that the only way we're going to actually drive a circular economy with plastics is if we have extended producer responsibility, which requires producers to genuinely contribute to the cost of the systems of collections and reprocessing. So that's a huge step forward, right? And I did take out of my press release, close your ears, Pete, that said we should be contributing to that and to not co-regulatory in projects, right? It's time to put it back into the infrastructure and system. So we need EPR in many, many ways, right? We need real green public procurement. New South Wales, and I'm only talking about them because they've actually listened recently, they've actually stated that they're going to say, first of all, and this was a WMRR thing, if you're not using recycled content, why not? And you have to declare it, right? You have to say why you're not using recycled content going forward as a government department. They're going to do a recycled material directory of products, so we've got to get on it. And they're going to start they're going to put a pipeline of recycled projects out so we can actually bid for it. So that's that market demand piece. We've never had that before, right? It's not mandated yet, but we're working on it. Polluter pays. Levy is just polluter pays, people, and it puts money back into the system. Why do we want to keep encouraging products to landfill without care and responsibility? Well-managed landfill are important, but we should be doing more. 3 times as many jobs by circulating than putting it to landfill. And I completely get there's regional solutions. Fantastic presentation this week from Resource Recovery Australia, doing tip shops, reuse shops, leveraging off it with men's sheds, people sheds, repair shops, awesome stuff. Was it Con who was at the beginning talking about the importance of that to community? There are so many things that we can be doing. We don't do anything by discarding and not holding people accountable. Real targets of reducing reuse. The only tax I would advocate, because I don't think levy's a tax, you can avoid it, all right? You can actually, if you don't put it into landfill, you don't pay it. But we should put a tax on virgin material because how else are we going to hold people accountable for not using recycled, right? There's a cost. So we've got to have proper systems thinking. In the UK, they've got a thing called the PRN system where you actually have to demonstrate where it's recycled and that it is turned into something. And if you actually it's tied to their VAT system, their tax system, and there's discounts and incentives, right? But it needs real systems thinking. You know, whilst we've got interest in our sector, it's still, you know, I agree with Rick, the stakeholders, it's like, who's the squeaky wheel? We've still got that at a high level. And you're always going to have that with the feds because they don't understand us, right? State and local get better ideas, but at least we've got their attention. So our goal is to harness it. And I think that's me. Is that enough? Yeah. Questions? Or you just say go? Oh God, no, not you. Man at the back. Sorry. Simple ones, not.
Is product stewardship
Is it enforceable? So my understanding, and Pete might touch on this better, is the act that they brought in can move it through a series of stages up until, I guess, the worst one is being mandated. But I don't believe there's penalties per se within that. They're moving towards accredited schemes to encourage, but I'm not aware. It's not my, I'll be honest, and Rose is here tomorrow talking about product stewardship a bit. She's more involved with the Centre of International Excellence. She can talk about penalties, but I don't believe there's penalties. Because, sorry, Pete, close your ears. We can get past the 2025 targets for APCO again, and there'll be no consequence other than for us. No. So every scheme's different, but I think they all work in the same sense of it's a refund scheme, not a deposit scheme. I think that's the same here. So in the sense of what happens is there's an aggregation piece based on sales as to how much is redeemed. And then they do basically a true up. So in theory, there's 10 cents in every state. In reality, there's 10 cents for the consumer in every state as a refund, plus there's a transport and handling fee that varies per state. Because we know that every jurisdiction redeems differently, South Australia is about 75%. They actually, the beverage, the suppliers pay 75% of those total costs into a kitty that's redeemed from. So it's not that they hold on to it. And you see those trips. So for example, in New South Wales, when we first started the CDS scheme, Line and that put 17 cents per container on from the beginning. They actually then, because all that money went into the scheme co's funds, then there was a true up and they reduced it to 13 cents because of the amount that was returned. So because the schemes, and I'm guessing NT's the same, has got a scheme coordinator with a financial transparency requirement. There's not the same in South Australia at the moment, and that's why they're reviewing it, because they don't have that transparency or power. In theory, the beverage don't get it back, in theory. Does that make sense? No? You don't pay a full 10 cents. The whole theory behind CDS is through the competitive nature and the redemption. It's not a straight 10 cents onto every container, right? The beverage industry pays a certain amount based on redemption. Okay, but every scheme's different, yeah? Yeah, sorry, I can sit and spend hours with you on that one. It's another one of my passions, yeah? Don't like the Queensland and WA scheme, but love the New South Wales scheme because of the transparency. Is that it? Oh, Rick. It doesn't get enough of me.
You touched on FOGO. Is there an argument that it's a step too far? We should get the go right before we get to FOGO.
So we've just.
Why are we jumping so much into it? We haven't got garden organics right.
Oh,
why are we going into the FOGO as well?
Okay, so we're having this exact debate in Queensland, and thank God he's not there anymore. So no disrespect. The thinking around, and the industry tells us, and I'll be really interested to see Pete say the same. If you do the go, right, you end up building assets for go. So, and then you have contracts for go, and then you kind of can't move to FOGO, right? So in order to get, and we know that the unprocessed organics in landfill is food more than go, right? So we strongly believe as an industry, we go once and we do it well. Right? So we go FOGO. We just get out because it's organics and we get it out. But the key is getting the regulatory framework right to say, because I don't know if you guys are aware of the municipal waste organic output revocation in New South Wales, which was when we used to be able to do red bin processing to get organic element out and apply to land. So it was a bit of an issue, got revoked. And so we've got like 40 million, no more than that, $400 million worth of stranded assets, right? So because suddenly government says, we're changing our mind, right? Overnight, yeah, basically. So we believe that you've got to go to FOGO, you've got to get the regulatory environment right, which says what your application to land rules are with your quality, and then you educate at front end with certainty as to what goes in the bin. So you make a really clear decision. Are we putting packaging in or out, for example? Is it just food scraps? Is it just garden scraps, right? Because the packaging, the compostable packaging, a new passion peat, watch out, is potentially a real issue for us. No worries. Is that it? So I hope I didn't annoy too many people. Thanks. Good.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Gayle, for that presentation.